Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Israeli occupation forces carried out a wide-scale military operation in the town of Jericho in order to seize the Secretary General of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, Ahmad Sadat, and 5 of his jailmates held in a Jericho prison. The detainees have been held for more than 3 years for killing the former Israeli tourism minister in 2001. Israeli forces surrounded the town of Jericho and stormed its prison with tanks and bulldozers. They shelled a number of areas and blew up the outer wall of the prison compound. Israel has declared an all-out war against the Palestinians. The Israeli forces surrounded the prison compound and demanded that prisoners and guards come out dressed only in their underwear. Nearly 100 prisoners, including Ahmad Sadat, the Secretary General of the PFLP, accused of killing the former Israeli Minister of Tourism in 2001, were held in that prison. Mr. Sadat and his friends refused to surrender.
We warn Israel not to continue this campaign of destruction and aggression. We also caution it not to hurt or kill Mr. Sadat and his brothers in the prison.
According to Palestinian critics, this recent escalation was premeditated and well-planned, along with British and American monitoring forces guarding the prison. British soldiers withdrew at night from the area in order to allow the Israeli forces to storm the prison. Palestinians and family members of the detainees in the West Bank and Gaza took to the streets in large numbers, protesting recent incursions. They held banners condemning the raid on the Jericho prison. In Nablus, angry crowds filled the streets. In Ramallah, protesters vowed vengeance against the Israeli occupation. In politics, the Palestinian presidential office held the United States and Britain responsible for such attacks. It also warned Israel against hurting or killing the freedom fighters. On the ground, Palestinians carried a number of attacks against Western installations in the Gaza Strip. Armed men and supporters of the PFLP have expressed anger and outrage for the Israeli raid on the Jericho prison, an attempt to seize or kill Ahmad Sadat. The PFLP staged a number of demonstrations and protests. PFLP supporters also stormed the British Cultural Center headquarters of the European Union and other foreign installations in Gaza and burnt them down. They also kidnapped a number of foreign nationals. The PFLP held the United States and Britain responsible for this Israeli offensive operation.
Israeli aggression is not a new thing. However, U.S. and British involvement in these Israeli criminal attacks is a new phenomenon. We hold Washington and London responsible for this criminal attack and for whatever transpires after.
The Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades, the military wing of the PFLP, has put their armed men on high alert. It vowed that it will strike back in the same way that it did last year when Israel assassinated its former Secretary General.
The Israeli entity knows well how the Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades and the PFLP will respond to this attack. We will retaliate in the same way we did last year.
After meeting with a number of detainees' family members, the Palestinian designate Prime Minister Hania warned Israel not to hurt or kill Mr. Sadat. He also confirmed that Hamas will do everything in its power to stop Israeli aggression. In another development, Hamas has suspended pre-scheduled meetings with other Palestinian factions in light of the Jericho attacks. Palestinian parliamentary blocs were expected to render a decision on whether or not they will join the upcoming government.
We were supposed to work out final details regarding formation of the new government. Hamas has already prepared the final draft of the makeup of the government, and it was supposed to present it to the parliament today. However, the Jericho prison siege, Saadat's arrest, and the death of a number of inmates forced us to suspend today's meetings.
In the aftermath of the Jericho prison raid, the door is now wide open for another wave of escalation between Israel and the Palestinians. The incidents in Gaza were only the beginning and a good sign of what could happen next.
Surrender or die. That's the message Israeli anti-terror squads gave to Palestinian terrorists responsible for the murder of tourism minister Rehvam Ze'evi 5 years ago. Army and police special forces stormed the Jericho prison where the five are being held to apprehend the gang. This after the PA said they were willing to free the jailed men. During the operation, gunfire broke out between soldiers and Palestinians at the site. 2 Palestinians were killed in the clashes, 9 others wounded. But at this hour, the wanted men remain defiant and say they will not surrender. IBA's Viva Press has more.
Israeli special forces raided Jericho this morning to arrest the Palestinian terrorists responsible for the assassination of tourism minister Rehvam Ze'evi. The 5 terrorists include Ahmed Saadat, leader of the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine terror group, and the man believed to have ordered the murder of Ze'evi 5 years ago, as well as 4 other PFLP members, including the gunman who shot Ze'evi. IDF troops stormed the prison after British and American monitors supervising the detention of Saadat and the other 4 vacated the premises. IDF troops fired tank shells and Israeli helicopters fired missiles into the compound in an attempt to force the 5 to surrender. By late this afternoon, some 50 Palestinian prisoners yielded to IDF troops. However, the wanted men said they would not give themselves up. Public Security Minister Gideon Ezra said the decision to snatch Saadat from his cell and transfer him to Israeli custody was made by Acting Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz. Ezra noted that the Palestinian Authority was not acting against terror, but rather aiding it by freeing terrorists. The IDF operation, called Bringing Home the Goods, comes a week after Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas said he was prepared to free Saadat. Meanwhile, incoming Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas told reporters in Gaza that, quote, using Palestinian blood for Israeli election campaigning will not be accepted by the Palestinian people. Abbas, who was in Vienna, said that Britain and the United States bore, quote, full responsibility for the IDF raid and said the international monitors were accountable for Saadat's fate. British officials shot back that the PA consistently failed to meet its obligations under the agreement reached over the internment of Saadat. As a result, Britain said it terminated its involvement with the mission. This is Viva Press for IBA News.
Parliamentary member Hanan Ashrawi condemned this heinous crime which led to the kidnapping of our brother Ahmed Saadat and official Fuad Shobaki, as well as a number of their colleagues. Her statement came after an emergency meeting was held by members of the Legislative Council at the council headquarters in both Gaza and Ramallah.
This is a provocation, a threat, and piracy. This act is a clear violation of all laws, morality, and values. There must be a response to Israel. These acts indicate their mentality, the aggression, and the methods used by Israel.
The Americans and British withdrew from the prison.
Yes, it is clear that there was a collaboration with American and British forces, despite the fact that they requested to monitor and protect the prison. These forces withdrew from the prison immediately, just before the Israeli attack. This means that they had previous knowledge and collaborated with Israel. They also took advantage of their authority and position and their unique relationship with the Israeli occupation.
Dr. Ahmed Bahar, the head of the Palestinian parliament, has issued the following statement to the Palestinian Legislative Council, PLC.
بيان صادر عن المجلس التشريعي حول اقتحام سجن أريحة في الوقت الذي يضرب فيه شعبنا الفلسطيني نموذجا رائعا في الصمود والثبات.
The following is a statement issued by the PLC regarding the Jericho prison raid. While the Palestinian people are portraying a good example of resistance and sacrifice, the Israeli enemy surprised us with a new aggression, ignoring its previous commitments with the Palestinian National Authority. The Israeli occupation forces carried out an offensive operation in the town of Jericho. They surrounded it and stormed its prison, where Mr. Ahmad Sadat, a parliamentary member at the PLC and the Secretary General of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, General Fuad al-Shobaki, and others are being held. This exposes the elaborate and organized Israeli scheme of terror. This shows that Israel continues to target the Palestinian people and their national leadership.
الذي يشكل استمرارا لكل الجرائم التي ارتكبها ويرتكبها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بحق شعبنا وقياداته الوطنية.
Palestinians have expressed anger and condemnation against this Israeli aggression.
In my opinion, this is against international law. These prisoners have rights, and Israel should not have attacked the prison. This is considered to be an international prison, and the inmates are international detainees. It has nothing to do with Israel, and the prisoners should have been protected.
This contradicts what Israel has announced yesterday. I heard via news radio that Israel has agreed that it would not assassinate Sadat. Today, what Israel has done proves that it does not abide by agreements. The Palestinian leadership must protest this recent attack. If Israel took Sadat that easy and despite previous agreement, it can definitely take over Gaza while we are sleeping. That's it, nothing else.
وفي فيينا دعا الرئيس الفلسطيني محمود عباس.
In Vienna, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called for the continued support of Palestinians by European countries. He said this after meeting with Wolfgang Schüssel, Chancellor of Austria and the current President of the European Union. Abbas also spoke about the situation unfolding in the Palestinian territories, specifically addressing the Israeli escalations in Jericho.
We are talking directly with the Israeli government through Saba al-Bakar, and we are communicating with the American and British governments about the situation in the prison in Jericho, where the Israeli government sent forces in order to occupy the prison when it learned that the British and American monitors were going to leave it.
In Iraq, 44 bodies were found in a small truck and mass graves were discovered in various areas of Baghdad. At least 80 bodies have been found since yesterday evening. Meanwhile, during a meeting with the U.S. ambassador to Baghdad, Zalmay Khalilzad, Iraqi political parties decided to form a committee from representatives of their choosing to come up with a framework of forming the new government.
Everyone in Iraq is dealing with a bitter reality. The phenomena of revenge attacks on mosques is creating major concerns. This mosque in Baghdad, called Abu Hanifa, was attacked by Katyusha missiles. A nearby home was also damaged. This attack came as a retaliation for the attack in the Shiite southern city 2 days ago, which killed dozens of people. The scenes of bodies and funerals have continued to increase. 46 bodies were found in a small truck, as well as mass graves in various areas in Baghdad. Some of the victims showed signs of torture. They were shot with their hands bound and mouths gagged. These are the characteristics that distinguish acts of sectarian violence and which have increased fear of the eruption of a full-blown civil war. The number of bodies that were found since yesterday has risen to 81. In Baquba, a small boy was killed by a roadside bomb.
My son is only a child of 12 years old, and he was killed by an explosive device. Why? We were just peacefully traveling to visit the Hussein shrine. Why do they attack us?
The rising number of killings comes at a time when a number of countries have vowed to withdraw some of their forces. According to the British Minister of Defense, the British forces in southern Iraq will withdraw nearly 800 troops by May. Despite being informed about the current escalation, which is being reported by many as sectarian violence, the Iraqi defense minister said no civil war was about to happen, nor was it expected to happen in Iraq.
وجهت نيابة أمن الدولة تهمتي المؤامرة بقصد القيام بأعمال إرهابية.
The district attorney of the National Security Agency charged 2 suspects with conspiracy to commit terrorist acts using firecrackers, which killed 1 person and partially destroyed a building with people inside. They obtained these firecrackers without legal permits in order to use them in illegal ways, with the participation of the Iraqi terrorist Sajida al-Rishawi and dozens of other suspects, including the convicted terrorist Ahmed al-Khalala, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, in the latest explosions in Amman. Sajida al-Rishawi, who failed to explode her suicide belt on November 9th, will be tried in this court. At the time, 13 other Iraqis exploded their suicide belts in the Radisson Sas, Hayat Amman, and Days Inn, killing 60 people. The court will try in absentia the convicted Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, another Jordanian Mazen Mohammed Shahadeh, and 5 other Iraqi suspects who escaped from Jordan after the terrorist explosions.
According to a Jordanian official source, 2 Islamist militants were executed by hanging after they were convicted on terrorism charges. Salim Saad Salim bin Suwaid, a Libyan national, and Yasser Fathi Ibrahim Frihat, a Jordanian citizen, were convicted and sentenced to death 2 years ago for killing Lawrence Foley, an American diplomat working in Amman. The execution took place in the Sawaka Rehabilitation and Reformation Center south of the Jordanian capital. Mr. Foley, a U.S. diplomat working with the International Development Agency, was killed in the garden of his house as he was getting ready to go to work on October 2002. In a rare move, the Jordanian Military Court of National Security in Amman handed a capital punishment sentence to Mr. Saad Salim bin Suwaid, a Libyan, and Mr. Yasser Fathi Ibrahim Frihat, a Jordanian, in 2004. They were found guilty of killing Mr. Lawrence Foley, an American diplomat. Prison authorities in the Sawaka prison, south of Amman, carried out the execution at dawn on Saturday. This was a clear message from the Jordanian authority that armed groups and terrorist activities will not be tolerated in the Hashemite kingdom.
This is a criminal case, not a political one. It is connected to terrorism, which has been plaguing most of the countries in the region. The court took all legal measures in order to make sure that the 2 defendants were found guilty on all charges beyond a reasonable doubt. After being indicted on terrorism charges in a military court, the 2 men were put on death row. Once again, this was not a political case, but it was rather a criminal one.
Jordanian security prisons are crowded with political and Islamist detainees. Some of these prisons hold more than 200 detainees. Many of the detainees get released after being cleared by the court, and others stand trial in the Jordanian Military Court of National Security in Amman.
The parties involved in the case were the defendants, investigators, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the court. Each party has its witnesses and evidence to present. Both defense and district attorney offices have their own witnesses and arguments. The presiding court will have the last word on the case, and it will enter a judgment based on a number of material facts.
The Jordanian authority had tried to carry out the execution of the 2 defendants more than once, but the procedure was postponed due to the prison rebellion that took place in Amman earlier this month.
What happened in Jordanian prisons was a security breach, and it must be remedied. High-risk and security detainees, especially those connected to terrorism and criminal activities, are not allowed to be housed together. They should be spread out amongst at least 3 detention centers.
The Organization of Civil Society in Jordan has a different point of view regarding court proceeding and the Foley's death case.
Death sentences in Jordan are rarely carried out for political detainees. Jordanians, especially those afflicted with armed groups, have expressed resentment regarding the death sentence. The court should have postponed the execution in order to diffuse speculation that the case was politically motivated. It is believed that the court's decision to pass the death sentence was triggered by the fact that the victim was an American national.
The Jordanian authority has never been easy on armed groups associated with terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda. It is now more determined than ever to crack down swiftly on such terror networks, especially after the Amman bombing attacks that targeted 3 hotels. There were no comments by lawyers of the 2 condemned involved in the assassination of the American diplomat Lawrence Foley. This is not the first time a death sentence was carried out by the Military Court of National Security in Amman, and it will not be the last, especially in the aftermath of the hotel bombing attacks last year.
لبرنامج المدار ناصر شديد قناة أبو ظبي عمان.
أهلا بكم من جديد.
Mohammed al-Hussein, the Minister of Finance, estimated that a savings of 130 billion Syrian liras are waiting to be placed in Islamic banks. His statement came at the opening of the first conference on Islamic banks and institutions, which is organized by the Salam Company for International Exhibits and Conferences.
شركة السلام للمؤتمرات والمعارض الدولية.
There was a consensus about the importance of completing the regulatory and legislative infrastructure for establishing Islamic banks and institutions in Syria. The Minister of Finance reported that Bill number 35 allows for the establishment of Islamic banks, and Bill number 43 allows for the establishment of Islamic insurance and bond agencies. Syria places a lot of importance on this project, considering that 130 billion Syrian liras are waiting to be deposited in Islamic banks.
I expect that the central bank will soon permit Islamic banks to be established in Syria. Regarding Islamic insurance agencies, last year they passed Bill number 56 for private insurance in Syria. We gave initial permission for 2 insurance and bond companies. God willing, very soon we will give them final approval to begin. Thus, we do not interfere. On the contrary, we are very serious and want this very much. We and the Syrian people are prepared psychologically and economically to welcome Islamic banks and Islamic insurance agencies.
I just met with the Minister of Finance a few seconds ago, and we agreed that there should be large Islamic investment groups and not small companies. We need to stand against the world banking system that takes advantage of money by subjecting some nations to economic oppression. We must stand against this oppression with Islamic economic institutions that extend a hand of support to all the small economic institutions in the world. We will tell them, come to us, we are secure, we will cooperate with you, we will not exploit you, and we will never take oppressive investment measures against you.
The speakers agreed on the importance of these banking prospects for economic development. Local studies indicated that there is high demand in Syrian society for Islamic banking.
النموذج المصرفي الإسلامي جاء
In the Islamic banking system, the bank does not play the role of a monetary broker, rather it plays the role of an investment partner. The money that will be collected from the private investors along with the money from the bank will be invested jointly. This capital will be invested in projects that are compliant with Islamic law.
The speeches and working sessions confirmed that the Islamic banking bank experience has continued to be successful for the past 30 years. It distinguishes itself from other banking experiences by sharing the burden of losses and profits, by being committed to the principles of Sharia law and contributing to the development of society and economic progress.
Those who follow the Dow Jones news notice that big stock companies like Microsoft and British Petroleum invest money in Western banks. I agree with the Grand Mufti's speech that we have to rush in establishing Islamic banks. The Islamic economy is not just about numbers, it is about social welfare based on cooperation and moral principles.
There are about 400 people participating in the conference. There are speakers from a number of countries. There are also a number of important people who work in the Islamic banking field.
What is important about this conference is that the principles were based on practical models of Islamic banks and institutions, which participated in the exhibit of banks, insurance agencies, and stock markets.
Moving to Iraq now, and most Iraqis have welcomed the US military decision to close Abu Ghraib prison. However, many have said they fear the US military will open other jails across Iraq and abuses will continue. Here's our report. The US military today announced that the prison at Abu Ghraib is to close within months. Its closure is charged with symbolism. Under Saddam Hussein's regime, the jail was feared as a torture center. By some accounts, as many as 4,000 people were executed in the prison in 1984. Under the US-led forces, the facility has been the focus of international criticism after a series of outrageous prisoner abuse scandals. Now it's a symbol of shame for the American occupation of Iraq. News of its closure has been received with widespread approval in Iraq.
This prison is old, and what happened inside it is difficult to believe. They were torturing Iraqi prisoners.
The US military will close Abu Ghraib, but they will open another 2 or 3 prisons instead. Iraq is now full of prisons and detention centers. They should fix the public services instead. They will close Abu Ghraib, but they will open 1,000 new prisons like Abu Ghraib.
Paradoxically, it's not the bad associations that Abu Ghraib has that have brought about its closure. The US military said it's being shut down because its location is in an insurgent hotspot and it's made its operation a security risk. The 4,500 inmates of Abu Ghraib are mostly being held on suspicion of insurgent activity. When it closes, they'll be transferred to the nearby Baghdad airport military base, among others. There are also new purpose-built cells at Camp Cropper, which will be completed within 3 months. The compound's presently housing Saddam Hussein and 100 other senior Baathists. In all, 14,589 people are held in 4 US sites in Iraq. More than half of them are located at Camp Bucca in the southern desert. The buildings at Abu Ghraib, which include the original 1960s British-built jail and surrounding tented camp that sprung up under US control, will go to the Iraqi government. It already operates part of the site as a prison. But whether it will run Abu Ghraib better than the former regime or the US remains to be seen. One thing is for certain, though, in these delicate times, as the country faces a real prospect of civil war, another prisoner abuse scandal is one the government will not be able to survive.
This prison has to be erased. All of us Iraqis have been humiliated in this prison. Myself, women and old men. But Iraqis believe that they will open another prison and they will humiliate more Iraqis there. The Americans are lying and they will continue to arrest Iraqis and humiliate us.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.